like I did when I was a child. And he gave me this one I want to share with you, and it's called Stone Soup. And I'm going to tell it as a parable because that's how it was given to me. And it starts out where a congregation is gathered at their church. Men and women, Wednesday afternoon, they're just having a celebration. Pastor, his wife, everybody's there. And a woman from the church comes running in. Pastor, come here, quick. You got to see this. And he says, what's going on? What's got you so riled up? She says, I was coming toward the church and I saw this man walking down the road. Long hair, his beard's scrabbled, his clothes are filthy, dirty. He's got a backpack on his back. The guy's picking up flowers and sniffing them and raising his hands. He's talking to snakes, he's talking to frogs, he's talking to birds, always waving his hands, picking up rocks, wiping them off with a rag, raising them in his hands, putting them in his backpack. And she said, this man's mad. He's just crazy. We got to protect ourselves. So the pastor tells everybody, we don't want this crazy person around us. We don't know what kind of harm he's going to bring us, right? So everybody, sneak out the back door of the church, get in your cars, go home, take off all your jewelry, all your makeup, undo your hair, put on your oldest clothes so you look dirt poor, and close up your houses so that he can't see any valuables. So everybody from the congregation leaves. Whew. Pastor and the wife are still at the church, but the doors are closed up. The man walks up into the yard of the church, goes over by the oak tree, like we'll use this for example, over by the oak tree. He takes his backpack. I just happen to have one. He takes his backpack, he picks up some sticks, he puts them on the ground, he starts to build a fire, and he reaches in and he pulls out a saucepan. And he's raising his hands, waving his hands, and he reaches in there and he pulls out the bag of rocks that he had picked up. And he took each one of the rocks one by one and he laid them in the saucepan. Pastor, eventually I'm going to need your help. Not now. I'll tell you when. But each rock carefully got put into the saucepan. Just like this. He sets his backpack aside, raises his hands. Thank you for the blessing of the stone soup. The pastor walks out, looks at the man, and he says, sir, I don't mean to be rude, but you can't do that here. What do you think you're doing? The man looks at him and says, I'm making stone soup. The pastor looks at him and says, what in the world is stone soup? He says, I'm making stone soup. You want to sit and learn? I'll teach you how to make stone soup. Pastor says, okay, as long as you're not going to cause any harm to our property, I'll sit and watch you make stone soup. So the man looks and the pastor looks in the saucepan and he says, isn't there something missing from that saucepan? And the guy looks in the pan and he says, yeah, something's missing. Pastor says, maybe we should put some water in that saucepan. So he goes over and he gets some water. And he brings it over to the man and he hands it to him, and the man holds up the water and says, thank you, I appreciate the gift of the water. He says, but you know what? I can't put the water in because there's not enough space, so let's take out one stone. And he puts the water in. And so the pastor's standing there, and the pastor's wife comes out. She says, Pastor, get over here. What do you think you're doing? He says, this man's teaching me how to make stone soup. She says, now what in the world is stone soup? He says, I don't know, I'm trying to learn. Why don't you come over and learn? So she walks over, she looks down in the saucepan, and she sees that there's stones and water. And she says, what is that? And the man says, this is stone soup. He says, but you know what? There's something missing. I don't know quite what it is, but there's something missing. She says, well, you know what? I have some chicken we were going to cook up for supper. Why don't I bring that over and we'll put it in the pot? He says, now that's a good idea. So she scurries over and she gets the chicken. And he says, but you know what? If we put the chicken in there with all those stones in, there's not going to be enough room. So let's take out a stone so that there's enough room for that chicken. So they're sitting there talking, and the associate pastor comes back to the church, and the congregation's starting to come together, and they all sneak in the back door. So they're peeping out the door and the windows, watching what's going on, and they're all talking amongst themselves. Well, what's going on? The pastor said we're supposed to leave this guy alone. Why is he out there with him? He's probably dangerous. Look how awful he looks. He doesn't even know how to dress. You know, he probably smells funny. He don't belong in this neighborhood. And so the treasurer of the church walks over and he calls over the pastor's wife. He says, hey, what's going on? She says, oh, this man's teaching us how to make stone soup. And he says, what in the world is stone soup? She says, I don't know, but you got to come and learn. So the guy comes over and he looks at the man. He says, what in the world are you doing? A chicken and water and stone, and you're making soup? The man says, I'm making stone soup. Would you like to learn how to make it? He says, well, yeah. He says, okay. He says, but you know what? The man looks at the treasurer and he says, but you know what? There's something missing. And the guy says, you know what? I've just picked some fresh onions from my garden. Let me go get them. So he runs and gets the onions, and the man holds up the onions and says, thank you for the blessing of the onions. And he says, but you know what? If we try to put those onions in that soup pot, it isn't going to fit. So we better remove a stone so we can get those onions in there. And the pastor and everybody are smiling, and they're actually having a good time with this man. They're fellowshipping and they're laughing and joking, telling different stories, things that they like and desire. He's just asking them simple questions, you know, and they're having a good time. And this continues to go on and on and on. One after another, the congregation comes out